5. Bloody hell. That was quick. And we are live on Oz Property Investors. We bring the big names and we have the big fun. Gaurav, how you going?
I'm well, mate. How are you guys?
Joe,
fantastic.
I got to do my top button up, man. Look at this.
Go on then. Treat yourself, mate.
Do I need to? No, I don't want to do that. I look ridiculous. No, suits you better than it suits me. So, no, we're going well. Good to hear, Gaurav. Man, you've been, I can sense the excitement and enthusiasm just in your chats. Like, you've sort of been really enthusiastic and just interested in what's going on. And it is going to be a fantastic, exciting session tonight. And it's good to be back as well. Took a break last week, but tonight we're going to unpack. Well, you literally got into Australia, and within 6 months, you're securing the title for your first property. So I think that was or securing, sort of getting under contract. So I want to talk to that, and then we'll sort of unpack the portfolio. So we'll look to the mindset and then actually the doing, because mindset about doing is kind of not all that. So you need both of them together, and then we'll sort of see, well, what's going to be on the horizon. And it might not be any more properties. Maybe there might be more. I don't know. I told you to surprise me with that. So I'll be surprised as well. So Joe, what are you excited about this session, mate? Everything.
Oh, mate, like Grav's been a part of our community since, I'm pretty sure, since the beginning. Like, you have been so active and on top of this property investing world. And when we sat down, so we have a bit of a pre-chat to find out a little bit more about the client, but the guests and what we're going to be talking about. And Gaurav moved to Australia in 2019 and has a property portfolio in excess of $4.5 million. Like, $4.5 million since 2019. He landed in March, and then in September had a property under contract. I don't want to spill the surprise anything, but that is absolutely incredible. So that is the main reason why I wanted to get you on, to unpack the mindset around it, but also the practicality around it and how it looks. And you've been kind enough to say, I'm an open book. I'm happy to talk about all the details and all the good and the bad and the ugly, and it hasn't been easy. But it's incredible, mate. So hats off to you for that. Congratulations for making it happen, and thanks for jumping on here.
Now, so Gaurav Makhijani, and I butchered that. Sorry, sorry, man. I've got my Aussie bogan accent. But so you, so as Joe said, over $4.5 million in excess. But what's more impressive to me is the 6 properties, and then the thirst and the desire to get that financial independence as well. And sort of look to explore how to sort of help and give back to the community in money management as well. And we'll share a little bit about the end. And you are a humble sort of, not a humble, but yeah, I suppose you're pretty humble. BA, you're not a buyer's agent though. You're a business analyst. I'd say, yeah, the more technical sort of BA. But no, you're a family man, and you own the property across Free State. And we'll talk to those and where they are in numbers. So. But the question we love asking people is, well, what is it that got you sort of fired up and excited about property investing? What got you interested in that?
Thanks for having us. I'm the speaker of the story, but it's a family effort. So I'll speak as we. Investing is always been at the core essence of our family values, from not just from moving to Australia, but even before we moved to Australia. And we like to invest every time we can in a systematic way. And when we moved to Australia, we realized that property is an important asset class to have in the portfolio. And hence, we started buying with our home within 6 months of moving to Australia. That was the first owner-occupied home in Brisbane. And within 6 months, and it wasn't an easy ride. We had a contract drop off because of the short time that we had, but then the house came back on market, and within that we got finance approval and moved through. And then since on, we build a journey around that. But yeah, happy to be here and happy to share what we have done. I heard some comments about it's not possible. I totally get that. You don't have to copy us what we have done. I think tonight is about learning from what we have achieved, and if you want to build on that, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, well, it's absolutely incredible. You should be super proud. Your kids and family should be so proud of what you have achieved, because it's definitely not easy to build something of this value so quickly. So hats off to you. You know, like, even if you just left this portfolio at $4.5 million, and it just grows at 5.5%. That's incredible. Like that's gonna set you up. That's the foundation. That's done. You're sorted. You're on mute, Jeff and Gaurav. You're both on mute. What are you guys doing?
Sorry. I know that we'll talk through this a bit more, but I was just doing some numbers in preparation to this chat. So
yeah?
the 4% growth, and I'm just not calculating the PPOR because it's not an investment asset, but even at the investment portfolio, it's about 7.7 mil, growing at about 4% over next 20 odd years. And that's where probably we need to probably draw a line in sand. Is it okay to sell or just build on this?
Wow. That's outrageous, isn't it? That whole compounding is and just the leverage and yes, we'll unpack at the back end more about sort of you're very vocal about shares, which is fine. I don't sort of mind. I mean, Joe might not be, but yeah, we sort of support people towards their goal. A question that let's tackle this kind of question up front because I think it'll be sort of interesting to hear your answer. I don't know the answer to this one, but how much Laura has asked, how much did you start with? Like, did you land in Australia with 150K in your back pocket, or was it sort of 10 to 15K? Like, what did it look like?
No, it didn't. And again, I don't want to make this an exercise of how much did I land with, but it wasn't significant. And if you look at the Indian currency versus INR versus converting that into dollars, it didn't just make sense because $1 is about, sorry, I may be just talking the other way. So it's about 0.19 cent of something as of today's value. So even if I had moved my assets significantly, it won't have made a difference. What I think made a difference, Jeff, and I would probably talk about this in my migrant mentality, I think what we need to be careful about is we need to, as migrants, we bring a lot of learning with our cultures, food, which we don't give up. But we also shouldn't give up our investing knowledge. Like property is a great asset class, right? Wonderful. It works well in Australia. It didn't work well in India. So we didn't invest a lot in India. We invested in managed ones. But it works in Australia as well. So we need to have a combination of both. That's what I want to tell today. It isn't about
Right.
property or shares. If I hadn't built the compounding index funds parallelly, I might not have been able to build this and hold this. That's what I want to talk about today.
Okay, so it was you were going for the most realistic asset that's in the region that you're in, right? What is the best asset
Correct.
that I've got here?
How did you even did you have some prior knowledge to understand why property works better in Australia? Like, how do you kind of learn that within like a 6-month period, or did you just have that?
Yeah, see, the part of the roles that we did back in India, we used to work in consulting projects, and a lot of our projects were for banking clients. And we were aware of how the mortgages structure worked, not investing side, but the back end with the loan interest were. And we also looked like this is pretty half the rate what we could get in India. People must be making a lot of money. Back then, the interest rates were about 5 or 6%. So hence, even now, well, I want the interest rates to go down, maybe as early as next week. And that's the banter we have regularly. But even 6%, 7% is quite reasonable, I would say.
Yep.
So I want to go back to that mentality, the mentality thing. How do you kind of get rid of your old preconceived notions? Okay, managed funds were really good, or shares were really good in my area, or this thing is really good. Like, how did you make that swift shift?
Yeah, see, when we came here, borrowing was available, right? So it was good to extend, and we'll talk through about the numbers and how we did it. But borrowing was available, and we thought that we'll build an asset class around which can significantly compound over a period of time. Now, I could have done this if the interest rates were extremely high in managed funds, but I would not have been able to build the portfolio so quickly. And I'll give you some good use cases of how we can probably utilize index funds as an option. Like we spoke about the scenario where you can park the money in offset, right? That's one option.
Yeah.
But if you have, I don't know, $500,000 sitting in ETF, for example, you can still withdraw about 5%. And Jeff, you would know more than this, more than me around this, the 4% rule. If you withdraw 4% every year, and that's compounding at 8%, that's still giving you the added benefit of compounding. So I'm not saying that one or either is better, but you have to have a combination, especially in a PAYG income scenario, of building both. So when you have the borrowing capacity, you build on your property portfolio. But when you're waiting, like, I can't do any more property investment, we can't do any property investment right now, you continue to build the ETF or index funds, whatever structure you want to build on.
Yeah. Well, for me, when I was saving for my deposit for my first purchase, that's exactly what I was doing. I was buying shares to kind of grow and expand out. I don't know how. I don't remember them doing spectacularly well. My first share was Woolworths, and it dropped 30%. I was like, how can Woolworths, one of the biggest Australian companies, lose 30% of its value? This share thing is weird. I don't know. I don't get it. But I did put my money into the shares, and then when I had the deposit ready, sold everything down, and then to then start my property journey. So it was a nice little safe haven.
And that's my point, right? There is no perfect answer why you should do property or index funds. I mean, I don't talk about shares because then you're really getting into one company. You need to understand the financials, etc. There is no perfect answer why you need property or index funds or what you should hold. It's going to be what you spend time reading about, educating about, and building on. There's no perfect answer. You cannot have either or. It has to be how much, when, and where.
So, okay. So you land in Australia. What did that look like for you? What were you researching? What tools and like education things did you kind of fall into? Because to be honest, I my property investing journey took a little bit of time because I was spending a lot of time. My first start was like the house and land property spriggers. Oh my gosh, I can save money on tax. Oh my gosh, I got these guaranteed rents. These things sound awesome. Like, how did you like bypass that and then no, we're gonna go down here first?
I guess one of the benefits of having spent some time and worked back in India was that we learned some bit of investing, and house and land package or buying apartments was something that was not favorable even there. I think I even shared in our chat that we still have an apartment unfinished. It's been about 12 years. So,
was that
so
11 years
can't
ago?
do-
12 years
11,
unfinished. Incredible.
Yeah. That company has gone out of business. So yeah, really can't do it. So we got into house, and Brisbane was quite reasonable back then, right? When we moved in. So first purchase was in Brisbane. September 19 was the settlement. We bought it for 545K, and the deposit I think we put back then was about 12%, so 65K. It was our PPOR from 2019 September till about February 2022. And that's where we built the portfolio and then moved on to the PPO, which was number 6, and we just talked to that as well.
Yeah. But so were there, because similar to Joe's journey, my journey was, I remember my first sort of property investment seminar was actually the Defence Housing Australia back in 2009. It was Blacktown RSL. I went down, it was after work. I was kind of getting almost, and I just thought, I went to it and I thought, my fire was ignited, and I was like, this sounds amazing. Like, they kind of hype you up and they get you all excited. And it wasn't a run to the back of the room kind of thing. And then it took me like 2 to 3 years just to sort of get my head around, well, how does this whole thing, where do I buy? Like, and just similar, like I see it day in, day out. So how did you even kind of realize, like, yes, you had the experience back in India with your off the plan that hadn't completed, but how did you get to Australia and know that it kind of worked in a similar, like, were there some books that you read, or were there some resources kind of podcasts you listened to, or was that, and you just made a plan and took an action?
Yeah, so after the first purchase, we did some renovations in that house because we had to do the kitchen. So got that experience as well of remodeling the kitchen and the finishing, etc. So that took about some time, and then we started interacting with a lot of people on Facebook, etc. Over the years, over the next 1 year. So we didn't buy anything in 2020. we
Yep.
came across a buyer's agent, Weber Rusty, and he was someone connected to our LinkedIn, and that's how we came across. And we thought, yeah, this is good. We had our property value, our home did not grow much back then because Brisbane was moving very slow from about 2019 till about beginning of 2021. But we
Yep.
had a decent deposit, so we thought we will do that. There was a deal available before this, which we didn't buy. So I'll just talk about that as well in the lessons learned. So
Ooh.
we really, I think, learned a lot from Rusty back then on how he could assist us. That was the only purchase that we had through BA. And then we also met a mortgage broker back then who was very educated on how we could structure the deal by maximizing our equity. So we used the deposit to bring down the loan for our Brisbane owner occupier. And that's how we could maximize the deposit. So the value from 545 had grown to, I believe, 600 when we made the first purchase.
Yep.
So we paid down 60K and then borrowed 80K.
So funny, isn't it? That's so funny that the broker, like the best way to get access to borrowing is to pay, rather than have more saving, is to pay down the debt to unlock you to be able to buy the next one.
Well, it's more about
Yeah.
the deductibility, Joe.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Sorry, continue. I kind of cut you off there, but.
So yeah, so this purchase was in Upper Hunter region. We purchased this with the help of Rusty, 464K. The current value has grown to about 700K. The rent back then was 430. It's now currently rented at 610 per week.
Wow.
Wow.
And I just love how you speak out this very nonchalantly. It's like you land in Australia, you buy your first property, and you sort of start to get comfortable. Because it took me probably, I don't know, 6 to 12 months of my first property to actually realize, wow, this is okay. The sky's not going to fall in if the tenant, because I had a couple of issues with my sort of tenant, the first property. I just wanted to take a step back and really sort of understand what was some of the, did you have a clear action plan in place to say, okay, I'm going to pull the trigger here? Or did you just say, okay, I have faith in property, I'm going to take action on it? Which one are you an action taker, or are you kind of here's the plan and we'll execute the plans in a step?
We kind of believe that it's good to have an overall plan, right? It's good to know that you can invest, save. Now, the asset class might change based on external factors
Yep.
and how the market is behaving, but you still got to grow your portfolio every week, every month, every day. The money has to work for you and your family in whichever asset class it's growing. And that's the mindset we need to really break. We don't need to be stuck with the interest rates, borrowing capacity, structures, etc., etc. We haven't bought anything in structure, so please don't ask me any questions about how do I borrow in trust, because our deposits did not make any sense. An accountant can kill me on this, but it didn't make sense, the advice we got back then, and that's how we have moved on.
Yeah, you just took action. Yeah, but so you had advice at that time.
Yes, and I think we had good advice from.
Interesting, super interesting.
I wanted to bring this one up. Sorry, Joe. If you recently heard another expert, because you took a lot of action. You bought those, and we'll talk to each of them. You bought those 6 properties in the space of about 2.5 years. So somebody and everybody's sort of talking COVID boom and all that sort of stuff. There's all reasons. But so the question is, recently heard another expert saying that buying badly, either wrong area or asset, e.g. apartment in an area where people don't want apartments, is worse than doing nothing. What are your views on that anyway, Rusty? Not Rusty. Yeah, you're right. GM. Sorry, mate.
Right. I think, there's no right or wrong answer to this, right? What you should buy, what you can't buy. There's no right or wrong answer. I think no one can replicate anyone's strategy or the assets that they bought, right? We can't be Warren Buffett of the world, right? They at their time got the best assets they could buy because they understood it. What we can probably learn from them is how do we hold assets over long time, and that's how you build a war chest around it, building your cash buffers, building your equity portfolio, which is probably index funds in our case, so that you don't have to tap on your savings, but still grow your portfolio. Right now, I don't want to be making an exercise of moving on to other asset classes because this is property, but your money works when you're sleeping, when you invest in an index fund. It works overnight. You need to invest every day.
Yeah, the way I kind of think about this, and I hear some people talk about it, so you've got essentially an army of little soldiers going out to you for battle, and that's my passive income army. I've got that army going out to me, and it's sending the dollars out there, and over time it'll start to come back, and there'll be more sort of resources that I'm able to deploy, and it'll just keep growing exponentially. I mean, some people use a snowball analogy, but I like to call it my passive income army. I mean, maybe I could trademark that, maybe not.
Maybe not. Don't think it's going to.
One thing, so people have brought up and said that were you an Aussie or Aussie PR? I imagine you were an Aussie PR, sort of coming over buying that first property.
Yeah. So we were on OCPR. So I don't know how it works on the FIRB, hence I answered the question straight away. So we were an OCPR. We now in Citizen. Our all property purchases were done before we qualified for becoming a citizen. Not throwing that out, but we thought it might be quick to get that early enough in a move here to get the compounding over next 20, 25 years.
Is there a difference from a borrowing perspective and buying perspective to have PR and citizenship?
No. A broker can jump in. I didn't have any specific issues around that. We had issue with the initial job because as I mentioned, we had just started. So we had the first contract fell off because we didn't get the finance, but then the house came back on market and we were ready after 3 days. So we went back to the dealer, our vendor saying that we are ready. The house come back. So yeah, don't stay. That's what I'll say. Keep trying. We've had all sorts of issues in our lending. Don't want to get any specifics. We have done equity extraction, debt recycling, tier 3 lending, move to private banking.
Yeah,
perfect.
That's a bit of I think a theme throughout your journey. Like you came to Australia, you took action, you've had those challenges, and we'll unpack some of them. Maybe not the lending ones. It sounds like that might be an area you want to sort of keep for maybe a quiet beverage or a quiet cup of tea, whatever you want to take. But no, it's just interesting kind of hearing just to talk to that difference, Joe, between the PR versus Aussie citizen. There's not a lot of difference in that. It's more once you start, and this is not financial advice, it's if you're a non-resident, if you're a foreign citizen, even in Australia, that's where most lenders don't like it and the reason being is because there's no tie to Australia. Once you're a permanent resident, you have more links to Australia. And that's why a lot more lenders start to get more comfortable with lending to Australian permanent residents.
Yeah, yes. Perfect. No, that makes perfect sense. So it's kind of one of those things for people. If you are not a PR, haven't got PR, then it might. I mean, chat to a broker regardless, but it might be worthwhile pushing for that a little bit harder if you're not pushing for it. Like I had a person, an investor that I was chatting with, and he's like, "I'm not a citizen yet, but I've got PR. Should I push for the citizenship?" And I didn't know the answer. So there you go. If you're watching, Roman,
it's a lot more expensive.
Share the link with him, mate.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Share this live, rewind. One of the questions I think that's worthwhile bringing up is why did you decide to go for the principal place of residence first rather than jumping into the investment first?
Okay, maybe I'll answer this question in two parts. And why was our rationale doing this? One, we thought that the houses in Brisbane weren't as expensive back then. The mortgage that we got would have been similar to what we would have rented a house for, or thereabouts, a couple of dollars difference. And we always wanted to own our house. The other reason was we could have then built a portfolio with the debt recycling, right? Because the mortgage went down, and I'll walk through the numbers in subsequent purchases. But we really used the cash savings, not a lot, but cash savings to pay down the first owner occupied property, and hence the debt, the non-deductible debt on that really came down, which kept our mortgage payments low to be able to borrow, in some cases 100% as well.
So borrow against that loan that you create a new loan based on the money that you've put it down. I think we
Correct.
need to do like a proper deep dive into debt recycling because it does confuse.
Yeah, I mean,
Sorry,
it's relatively I'd say it's somewhat simple. I mean,
straightforward.
Aaron Christie David sort of mentioned a little bit, but it essentially you're taking debt that and then it helps from a borrowing capacity because then I mean, put up the disclaimer, Joe, but it then sort of helps because then you can the tax kind of benefits are because that debt is tax deductible, or generally speaking. Whereas principal place, and I was speaking to my broker about this yesterday, is saying, and just the difference like between it being owner occupied debt versus investment debt, because you start like we're talking sort of for me it was over $100,000 just because yes you have rental income but you also have tax deductibility of generally of that debt, so it can be quite powerful. So the advice you've been given there, Gaurav, was really sort of sage, and I think your broker is seems like they're a good one or a keeper. On that sort of, what sort of challenge did you have? And we'll talk to sort of, I want to know more about the subsequent purchases and how you just did that. But how did the team go? Did you outgrow some of your team? Did you have to kind of get more people on board, or what was that process?
Great question, Jeff. And I was really thinking about this last night. I think from our perspective, the team has been my family, right? My wife and my son. We have outgrown professionals at various times for various reasons because of borrowing capacity or their lender not being on panel. But really, we have had some great advice from people like Rusty, being our first buyer's agent, the only buyer's agent we ever worked with. And buyer's agent are great, right? There is a reason why buyer's agent are used, and probably we can talk about it. But really, I think the focus has been us really in being involved in it. When we did the first purchase, I think this settled around April 2021, and we were camping in Coffs Harbour. Right when this house was about to settle, we did a day trip from Coffs Harbour to Upper Hunter just to do a pre-settlement inspection. It was not planned, but we made it happen. So it's about a 750-kilometer return trip on day one. I think kudos to my son. He sat in the car and was like, awesome, right? It was raining. We camping.
750 kilometers.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, from Brizzy down to Upper
No,
Hunter,
not Brizzy. Coffs Harbour. We camping in
Coffs
Coffs
Harbour.
Harbour.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, it's interesting that you outgrew your professionals because I think that's what a lot of people do, but then they just stop. So what did that look like for you? What were the action steps that you kind of took how did you recognize you outgrew your person, and then what are the steps that you took?
So we'll probably talk through subsequent purchases. So next purchase was in Victoria. We were still the same broker back then, and this was done through. So we paid a cash deposit of 30K into the owner occupied, and then extracted equity of 51K. And this purchase was 340K back then, rented for 330K back, 330 per week back then. And then now it's sitting at 450, and 450 is the weekly rent. So yeah, we have moved to different professionals at different times, but we have been very clear in communications. The reason why we cannot move is because we have outgrown or they can't work for various reasons.
So what are sorry, you don't need to share maybe that, but like, when do you know? So from someone else listening, how do I know that I've outgrown my professional?
You need to ask, right? So you just don't take no for an answer, right? Like I said to Jeff, we don't take no for an answer. When we were doing our number 6, we had really reached a point that we had to go to a tier 3 lender, and the deal was done between 2 different brokers. Like one broker had done the equity extraction out of the investment property, and the other one had done the loan for the tier 3 lender. You just work with them, right? It's your portfolio. You are the captain of the ship. You need to run it. Great professionals, take advice from everyone, from every book that you can read in the corner. Take advice, apply it to your circumstance, and grow. Right?
Yeah. I think what I'm hearing there, and this is something that we're all a little bit guilty of. We sort of have that loyalty, and loyalty can be great.
Yeah.
It can also be disparaging to somebody's journey, because from the sounds of it, the broker you kind of moved across from, they just unfortunately didn't have that technical knowledge on understanding how or they didn't have that lender on their panel, the third tier lender. And it's kind of at that stage where you sort of realize, and if you have to realize it within yourself, because some people, I mean, I'm probably just too nice. I'll just say, oh, look, I appreciate that you've done your best, and I'll sort of go away and sort of think about it for 3 to 6 months. And I realize, oh crap, actually, but you kind of seem to have that instinct and that knowledge that unfortunately that professional may just not be able to help you any further. So I think it's more just natural for you to, when you see an obstacle, you're like, well, how do I solve that? It's not, I'm just going to go and sit back in my corner and wait for something. I'm going to go and make it happen. It's going to have that conversation. So that kind of sounds like how you overcome and learn.
Well, what it sounds like to me is you sit down with your, great, I'm ready to buy another property. I've got, $80,000 of cash and equity that's going to allow me to do this. And you go to the broker and they say, look, I've done the numbers. It doesn't work. Well, what have you done? What lenders are you using? How are you thinking about this? Oh, did you factor in I don't have any credit card debt? I got rid of that. Oh, I totally didn't think about that. Boom, go back again. Did they have an answer for you? No, they don't. Cool. I'm going to go have a chat with another broker. Well, you don't need to tell them specifically, but, you can't help me? No, I can't help you, man. Cool. Great. I will then go find another broker that's going to help me. And I've seen some of the comments that you've posted throughout the years. I was going through the history of you, Gaurav, and you're just like, great. Who's got a solicitor in South Australia? Who's got a property manager in South Australia? Who's got a great broker? Who's got a great, XYZ. And it's like, that's how you kind of find the right people to ask you just ask the right questions. Can you help me? And if the answer is no, cool, move.
Yeah, I think the community of property investors has been really helpful. So I think we joined in about October 2021. I think this was the time when we were doing about the 4th purchase. But yeah, it's been really helpful. I'll just take a quote from Bill Ackman. It says, in order to be successful, you have to make sure that being rejected doesn't bother you at all. So you might get a no for an answer when you put an offer. You might get no for an answer from your broker, but just keep trying. Go for it.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Keep trying.
I'm a big fan of Bill Ackman gets mentioned a lot these days. Like he's kind of that sort of I think he's almost got as successful record almost as Warren Buffett. I mean, it could be wrong. Somebody quote me on that, but yeah, he's really kind of coming out of the sort of shadows. Do you want to talk to that? Yeah. Did you utilize LMI? That was let's
great question that comes up. Like how do you think about lenders, mortgage, insurance on the PPR or both? Do you advocate? How do you think about it in general?
So in our case, we had the first 3 purchases: the Brisbane owner occupied, the Upper Hunter investment property, and the regional big property in LMI. There's a time and place for everything, right? And it also depends on your circumstances. Now, we've had the great Charlie Weller on this podcast saying that you need to put 30% deposit, right? We could have done 30% deposit, right? Would have taken probably 10 years to build that. We had incomes, we had the cash flow support, so we did it. I mean, if I still had the deposit, and I'll probably give a reason there. If I still had the deposit back then, I would have probably invested the balance in the next one, right? And made 2 separate investments, or made 3 investments out of my cash, right? You need to get more door in the market so that you can get your portfolio growing. LMI is a cost to do business.
Yeah. That's kind of the way I think about it as well. Avoid it if you can, but embrace it when you have to. And if that means you can get into the market sooner, and the market's growing at 3% a month, or 2%, or 1%, or 5%, and there's no way you're going to be able to save that money faster than it's growing. So it's a mathematical decision of, cool, I'll pay the $8,000 over the next 30 years because I don't have the extra $50,000 that's needed to avoid the LMI. But also, you're not there. You're not going to be in that situation going forward forever. I mean, the LMI is there forever. You do have to pay that down once you've done it, but you can pay down more of a deposit later down the journey.
Yeah, and I think that's what we will need to be careful of. So when we talk about the subsequent purchases, you need to have a balance in your portfolio. You can't live off life of a 10% equity, right? You need to grow that. Now that has to come through various ways. Now, when we did the first purchase, we bought it in LMI, but when we did the refinance and the value had grown some 30 or thousand, we put the deposit, we put some cash back so that we can get under 80%. And then subsequently we could extract equity. So there is a time and place for everything. There's no right or wrong answer in the world of investing. People will think that you're silly for a long, long period of time until you're proven right, right? I mean, look at this, right? Someone coming into Australia in 4.5 years, 5 years, we build this and it's happening, right? We've made a seat on the table on the biggest property show. So do it, guys.
Which show is that, Gaurav? I mean, I don't know which. Can I get on this show too? No.
Yeah, I'm here, right? It's live.
It's so true. It's so true.
What I wanted to know, before we sort of start to talk to the next couple. So first one you had in kind of Brizzy PPOR, second one Upper Hunter, and then your third one in Victoria. I'm interested. It's sort of how you sort of started to do that research, because the first one you went the BA, second one. But I wanted to know, for somebody sitting at home and they're not a business analyst and they don't, I feel like you have quite a mechanical brain. Like you work very, it's like, okay, well, if this and that, like it's very structured and processed. For somebody, what can we learn from your sort of process and an idea about thinking about investing?
I think it's about the understanding of gentrification. And I had been following one of the podcasts that I really, really love. And when I was doing we were doing number 3, number 4, number 5, is the property trio. Erstwhile, the property planner, professor, and buyer from Kate Beckhouse, and now Mike, and previously Peter Cordesos. And so Peter really had good insights about how to identify a gentrifying suburb. And I think he was on the show as well.
Yeah, we had him on the show talking about gentrification. So if you go way back, you'll see a Peter Klesos with a chalkboard. I think it was the property professor doing gentrification, and the suburbs that he mentions in that live session, 3 years ago, have killed it. They absolutely, whatever he said was absolutely spot on, and they crushed.
Probably doubled. I think he was talking about, he loves, I mean, he's an Adelaide local, so he kind of loves Aldinga and kind of Morford and Seaford and all those kind of suburbs down that way. But no, that's really interesting that you sort of, I suppose I was talking more about this. I did sort of talk research about that, but how did you even sort of then start to think about, like, you just sort of took, it sounds like you have a very methodical process. It's like, okay, well, and I did this with somebody, I tagged a couple of brokers and said to them, the first step you need to do is go and reach out to these brokers and come back to us. So is that you created a step-by-step process. And then it's like, if this step, it's almost like one of those charts where you go to the step process. And if that step fails, if it's a yes or a no, you go to that other step. Is that the way you kind of think about your property investing?
So one is the area identification, and the method that we followed was we didn't go through to one state. So when we were looking at the regional Victoria, we were also looking at Adelaide suburbs, and we couldn't get through. So that's been part, right? I mean, the option was either buy in Adelaide or not buy in Adelaide or buy nowhere, right? So we always look at 2 or 3 areas when we were doing the research, not just one market, because you really can't time everything, right? They might not accept your offer. So we got that ready. And I think one of the other person I would like to credit is Scott Agate. He really had some good sessions with you guys on how to reach out to the agents. So we used to send out emails to all the agents in the area, how they're doing. We have finance ready. Our finance was always difficult because of equity extraction and always got delayed or extended. But I think advertising your requirement is always great. You get on the dealer board and then you probably call them, a few of them every week, and just get through it. In terms of the area identification, we really looked at how the incomes are growing with the ABS stats and also the owner-occupied portion. But I think sometimes you also need to look at the government policy changes, right? Like, for example, Gold Coast Council, which is one of our purchases subsequently, some of the suburbs have really not as significant as owner-occupied portion, but there was a significant policy change made back in 2019, 2020, when they allowed the non-permanent residents to move into Gold Coast as a region. So the council price is really short, the rent is short. So you also need to be mindful of what's happening in terms of the policies, so that you can tie the data back to what's happening on ground. You don't need to be there, but you just need to build your analysis around that.
Yeah, I think it's often overlooked where people get too data focused on just a one little suburb and not thinking about the macro of where that suburb sits, because there are areas and suburbs out there that have incredible data. It looks like incredible data on the surface of it, but it's not factored in against the entire region. And you can see it's like, oh wow, that suburb looks great on paper, but that's just one area. Everything else around it looks pretty not so great. And then you look deeper, oh, that nothing's happening in that area. It's not going to be a long term. It's just a little blip in the radar. It might do something in the short term, but long term, it's not going to give you the numbers that you need it to be. So did you call council and stuff? Like, did you have conversations with the council people to say, hey, I see that this thing's going on. Is that actually happening? Is it delayed? Or how do you do that research?
Yeah, so call up the council just to understand that. I think what also worked in our favor is because we had two people working together, both were involved, myself and my wife, and big kudos to her on being on this journey. We kind of set up a method that she would do X steps, maybe by emailing agents every fortnight or giving them call or sending out offers. So if anyone on this journey really wants to learn something about this, is build knowledge with your family, right? Have your date nights around talking about properties. We have some serious conversations about how we can do the next steps, how we build this further. Your best team is your family. You need to get them involved on the journey. And it's important they are combined with you. I couldn't have done this myself. It's no mean feat, right? It has to be a combined effort, not just in terms of income, right? You can't do this on a substantial or reasonable income. It has to happen. You have to grow. Our incomes have grown, our portfolio has grown, but our knowledge also has grown in this area. That's how you build your portfolio around that.
How did you enroll your partner or your wife in that sort of journey? Because some people, they sort of say, oh, you have to drag them, or partner, or yeah, it can be husband or wife. It doesn't have to be, yeah, if you're watching this and your husband's not that involved. How did you did you drag them kicking, screaming, or was it seeing the results? What was the tactic you got to make it happen?
Well, these results are not my results. These are our family results, right? So she was always on the journey from when we got married, right? We bought our first house in India back then when we got married. In a year's time, we bought a land there. So it's not just that we've started here, right? We were doing this back then. We just continued. Migration should not change your circumstances. Have I ever thought of becoming a president? Won't say no. It's quite lucrative. Would I? I don't know. Not at this point. So yeah, family has to be. You have to really bring them on journey. What if you're single? You still need to grow your mindset, right? You need to find the right partner so that you can really go on this. And there are some good sessions on this podcast called Money, 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 which Glenn James runs. Just go and sign up there. Really, you get good content on how. Sorry.
What did you take? What's the kind of key takeaway that you took from that podcast?
He really talks. I don't know if you've heard that podcast. So they run two podcasts. One is Money, Money, Money. One is the other Retire, right? Any retiree who's planning to retire in the next 10 years really should go and listen to them. And I think from my perspective, listening to Retire Right has given me a perspective about how really superannuation is very powerful, right? We kind of really overlooked.
Superannuation, sorry, or did you say super ambition?
Superannuation. So super is quite powerful, right? I mean, it's probably the best structure you can have. And I'm not saying property or no property again. I personally have used that. You shouldn't have a property in SMSF. One that did a very great session. Go and listen to that. But I have my own reasons why you shouldn't do property inside SMSF. I'm not saying that I won't ever. Currently, we don't, and we don't have any plans to that. But superannuation is very, very powerful. Go and listen to Retire Right. You will really gain a lot of it out of it. and you will really build your end-to-end knowledge of how you can retire right from your portfolio, even when you're in 40s like us.
Not 40. Oh, I suppose yeah. Really wanted to bring this comment up from Greg, and Greg's I've asked him on a pod once or twice, but he's like, I got to do some more. Anyway, he said, I love this, Gaurav. Family on board is key to success, in my opinion. And without my family, nothing really matters. I tend to agree because, and to Jack's and the person who made that comment about what happened if you're single. For me, it's kind of building whoever those kind of core 5 in your life is. It can be your footy team, it can be your whoever it is, your kind of the girls you go out with on the weekend, or whoever it is. Like just kind of those people that are really critical in your life. Make sure that those people are important. You really kind of build with them, and you kind of have those critical conversations, and don't be afraid to have those. And it may, if they're the right kind of people who are your vibe, then they'll sort of come along for the journey with you. And if they're not, then you may discover that maybe they're not the people maybe people you have the fun with. So I think it's whether you're single or you have a family. That's fine.
Yeah, well, no, I think that what you're saying there is like, it's not just get rid of those people, it's just find new people that are the property people. Like if I've mates that I go out with and I talk about property and they're just so bored. They don't. I was just like, great, yeah, I did this. Jeff and I are building a property portfolio. We bought $2 million worth of property and we're going to retire on 150,000. We just bought this great. What did we buy, Jeff? The unit block. We bought a unit block, and we're going to make $400,000 in a little bit of month, like with $40,000. And they're like, "Oh, snooze fest, Joe. Move on. I'm bored." Cool. We're not going to talk about property. I'm going to go find my property people and communicate with them a little bit. But that's how you and I met, Jeff. We went to a conference. We jumped on podcasts. Like whoever is on this podcast right now commenting is clearly a property fanatic, right? These are people that are trying to get better. So if you see anyone that makes a comment, then you're like, yeah, I'll reach out to them. Let's have a chat. Maybe we're locals. Hey, I see that you're in Sydney. Do you want to catch up? You want to grab a beer? I'd love to pick your brains. What did you do, Jeff, actually? Because I think you were very aggressive, not aggressive in a bad way, but aggressive in your education and in connecting with people.
Yeah, I mean, I want to bring this back to Gaurav because he's got so many more properties in his portfolio. But no, for me, the way I did this is I actually, and I'm not saying you should reach out to everybody left, right, and center, but I created a small group of about sort of 40 to 50 people, and I just literally would jump on the phone and have that conversation, and I created a small group. It's like a microcosm of what Oz Property Investors became. And you can anybody can do this. You can literally kind of create your own property microcosm. And I think or share a microcosm, or even anything in your life, you can do that. Like, so I essentially interviewed these people, and I think I only knocked back 2 or 3 people, but most people were just sort of passionate about property. And,
so what did that look like? What were you trying to get out of that? What did a sit down look like?
Yeah, most of these people were by phone anyway, because some were in Queensland, some were in Victoria. So literally have a bunch of free questions, like what do you want to achieve out of property? Like, what are you currently kind of doing? And like, what sort of, those are the kind of questions I ask these people. And that's how I created my own little community that I did do. But,
so you just call these people up randomly. Hey, I'm not sure if you know who I am. My name's Jeff. I'm super pumped about property. I have 3 questions to ask you that I'd love to hear your answer from, because you're clearly far above where I am. You're where I want to be. Have you got 2 minutes to answer? And then all of a sudden that 5-minute conversation turns into an hour and you've just downloaded the gold.
it was mostly people I saw as peers. Like I wasn't calling up the Chris Grays or the Steve Knights of the world. But no, that's what I did. So Gaurav, I want to know, mate. So where did you? So Property Free was in Victoria. So how do you feel about Victoria now? Take us on a little bit of a detour. Are you still feel good about Victoria, or?
I actually would like to post a question to the group here. Would anyone not be buying in Victoria now if we didn't have the land tax issue? I think it's a great place to buy if even now with the prices. I'm not saying Melbourne in specific. But Melbourne, probably because of the oversupply, has really killed it, the western suburbs specifically. But Victoria probably is great buy even now for the price that you can buy, the rents you can get. And the incomes are not bad, right? The incomes are improving.
Yeah.
Like, just to give you an example, in the Victorian property, we have had 2 tenants so far, and both of them have bought their properties in the same region. So they must be liking to live in the area, right? So population is growing, income is growing. There's no reason why the values won't move up with time. And that's what I want to tell today, right? You don't need to buy the best property. You buy the average property and hold those for more than the average period, right? You really need to extend the time that you can hold the properties for 20, 30, whatever years you can. And that's with every investment, right? Compounding kicks in over time. I'll give you an example of the Brisbane property, just circling back to that.
Hang on, your examples. I'm keen to hear your example, but it's been 4 years, Gaurav. You've turned 4 million. You've got a 4.5 million. You've absolutely killed it in no time. It's not about waiting for you. You've just gone and bought well and negotiated strongly, bought in the right locations. Now compounding is going to do its thing for you. You've crushed
He's very
it.
humble.
So just going back to the Brisbane property, right? No, this property we bought for 545. I was just looking at some stats, right? So we bought in 2019. The house just bang opposite this house sold for 470K in 2007. Now that was a slightly better house than our house, the one that we bought, but they didn't have any movement for like 12 odd years. The owner that we bought the property from in 2019 had bought the property in 2004 for 225K. So they made money, but they would, if they would have held for a few more years, they would really killed it, right? So so that's what I'm saying. You need to get in, and that's what we firmly believe in. Get in, build the war chest, build your cash buffers, build index portfolio. It's really important for PAYG people to build an index portfolio around it, because when you have these cycles of interest rate hikes, you really can tap on that extraction and let that money grow in the back end, right?
What does that mean? Hang on. What do you mean you can tap into that extract? Let's talk to that share thing, because you keep coming back to the shares.
Yes.
What are you talking about?
So just to give you an example, if you have 500K sitting in an index fund, I mean, I'm just giving example numbers, 500K. Now, if you were to withdraw 4% out of that every year, compounding at 8%, that money would still last you for 39 years at an indexation of 4%. And Jeff, you might know this. You can probably check Noel Whittaker's compounding calculator on how it works in retirement. I can bring it up in a sec. So the way it works, if you've got 500,000,
that's 20 grand. You got $500,000 at 4%. That's $20,000 of pure cash money.
25. Yeah, oh, sorry. Yeah, you're right. My bad. I was thinking 5%. Yep, 4% on the money.
Yeah, let's just give some justice to the calculator. Maybe I'll bring my screen.
Oh yeah, you can share your screen if you want. Yeah, bring it up.
And we've got another.
But I mean, what's that got to do with the deposit, though? I don't understand why we.
Yeah, that's what we want to break today, right? We need to. Sorry, am I sharing my screen? No.
You got to hit the present. Yeah. So I think what you're saying is there's an opportunity there if once you've kind of invested in the property and you've seen some growth, but you can't necessarily, let's just say if you can't get out 100,000 to get that deposit for the next property, are you sort of saying you're seeing the opportunity to, if you can get 20 to 30,000 to start investing some of those funds? Is that what you're talking about, Gaurav?
Yeah, so one could be that, like right now scenario, you don't have borrowing capacity, so you compound every month sitting in the index fund. But the other opportunity is, let's say if you have 500K of equity available and you can't find any property, then you extract the equity out, have that sitting in an offset account for a period, but not very long, invest gradually in a index fund so that fund grows over time. What that allows you is to build a war chest around your investment portfolio. So just to give you an example, with a 500K of index portfolio, if your funds grow at 8%, and you can check any index fund, S&P 500 or regular, that's been growing at about 9.5% a year. If you're drawing about 20,000 a year with an indexation rate of 4%, so you're not just withdrawing 4%, but that goes up 4% every year. That money will last you for about 87 years, actually. with the indexing as well. And that's one reason why I
I don't
mentioned
think I'm going to last 87 years, to be honest.
yeah, but see, but the point is that money that you're drawing is growing every month, Joe. It's not just 20,000. You can be drawing 20,800 in the first year, 21,000 in the first year. It's growing with the index, right? And that's why this taboo around superannuation, we should have properties. No, because you got to sell down the property, right? But if you've got these funds, they grow for the next 40 years. You don't need $1 million in retirement, right? You need to have those funds compounding for the next 40 years that you live.
I'm just going to throw the disclaimer out there. This general information. I'm not saying go and try this strategy, whether it be property or shares. We should go and go and make sure you check with your financial advisors, brokers, all those good people. Yeah, because we start getting into those sort of strategies. But no, I mean, I see that there's not. I still love I love my property. I'd rather kind of figure out a way that I could do that. But so there is an opportunity there. And I think on the back end, that's where we'll talk to what your next kind of plan is, because for me, there's no one size fits all. So where did you go from? And it was in regional Victoria, if you know, I mean, we could, you go as specific as you want to. What happened after that? Because how did you sort of feel after buying your third property in Victoria? How did that sort of happen? Where did we go from there? What was your...
So Brisbane prices were going up. We had switched jobs. I think one of us had switched jobs then, so it was difficult to get a loan on a 10% LVR. But we didn't use any deposit for the next one. We extracted 100K equity from the Brisbane property. And so I think Brisbane had grown to about 800 something back then. And then we extracted 100K equity and bought the fifth in Toowoomba for 400K. It was rented at 400K back then, now at 475 per week, and the value is 550K.
Wow.
So that's run about 12% compounding. Doing quite well.
Yeah, it's also fun. What's funny about what you're kind of talking about, you took 100K of equity out, which means that the amount of cash that you put in to get $150,000 worth of extra equity was literally zero. You put $0 of cash in because you took equity out and then put that in to get a property that has now made you $150,000. So it's literally 1,000,000% return ROI on cash down. Maybe not 1,000,000, but it cost you literally no cash whatsoever. It was all equity. And this is the power of compounding leverage and buying good deals. That last part is the most important thing.
And that's my point. It can't be either or. It has to be both, right? You read too many books out there that tell either property, or either shares or equity. It has to be a combination of both. And that's what has done well for us. You need an ideal combination of both the asset classes to have your war chest ready, not just in your offset account, but also in your growing portfolio that you can tap on if you have any scenarios of your hot water system going, your vacancy rates, your interest rates going up. You can all manage that quite well.
So do you sell down? So you have, instead of having money in the offset, you have money in a share portfolio instead of an offset account. That's what you're saying?
Both. It has to be, right? So we have all the rents coming in the offset account. We have all the incomes going into an offset account. And again, it's still just not talking about investment, but we have really adopted a cash management procedure, which was also used by Max Phelps and Barefoot Investor, right? So you put the money every week when the pay hits, or every month when the pay hits, growing into a holiday account, your bills account, your investment account, and a systematic investment goes into the share portfolio, not shares, but index funds, where you can continue to grow those.
I think this is an interesting question that because right now we talk a lot about property and we don't talk too much about shares. So I think there's a lot of questions like, how do you think about, what kind of ratios are you kind of thinking about when it comes to, I'm going to have, 50% of my cash allocated to property, 50% to shares, or is there a sweet spot for you, or too much or too little? How do you think about it? Don't need to give 100% numbers, of course.
seek advice on that one for sure. But yeah,
Yeah, definitely seek
general.
advice. But I can tell you what I believe. What we believe, I should say, not me, is you need to have a balance of both. So when you start, like we have, I mean, if I had been 20 or 25, it would have probably been different. We would have had more index funds because of borrowing. But if you have more time on hand, I think index funds work quite well because of compounding. If you have less time, you migrate into a country like us, you need to build the funds quickly, which is exactly what we have done. I mean, I'll give you an example, and you might just blow away with this. If you start at the age of 0, like on day one,
As you do.
$1,000 compounding for 18 years, that changes to 540K, right? Now, if you leave those
Sorry, what?
540
$1,000 a year?
a month,
Oh, a month. Okay. Yep.
$1,000 a month, and you can change zeros, right? If you do $1,000 a year, it will be 54,000 or whatever. But if you do $1,000 a month, 18 years, 540K. If you leave those $540,000, don't invest anything, enjoy your life. What would be the amount at end of 42 years? Anyone can pull up a compounding calculator for me and do numbers at 9%, please. That's the regular rate of return for any reasonable index fund. I think it was last I checked about more than 20 mil or something.
Yeah, the only challenge I have with, and not just with shares, with property, is the sequencing risk. Because if you, and I'm not saying anybody do this, like somebody bought in Perth in 2014, like right, and you'd have to be unlucky to kind of pick the tops. I'm cherry picking examples to illustrate an example where it may not work so well. Let's just say you buy, I don't know, you buy at the top of COVID, and yes, you can dollar cost average and all that sort of stuff. But it's the same with buying a property market. Like if you bought Darwin in 2010, right now you're probably lucky if your property's worth more than what it was when you bought it. So that's my only kind of contention that with any kind of investing and using those, yes, it could go to that, but just be mindful that it might not. And if it doesn't, then you need to kind of sort of look at that plan along. Any investing, I don't think, should ever be set and forget. Passive investing, passive income is a bit of a misnomer for mine.
No, not really. And that's why I said it can't be either or. It has to be a combination of both, right? So if you're young, you start with index funds because you can't do borrowing. You build your war chest around deposit, and then you got 540K, you can put some deposit and then build around it. So why do you want a 3% return in bank, right? If you've got 5-7 years for that money to grow, let it compound. Now, maybe don't do all of it. Maybe do 50-50. Do some bit of savings in cash in your savings account and some bit in the market. Your money is still working for you. And people might argue that you would have a CGT at the end of the event. Fair enough. You would have a CGT in the investment property. You won't make rental returns, right? If you buy a first property in the current market, you can't get rental return.
Yeah.
So true. Well, it's also like the savings, the difference between a savings account, having savings rather than having an offset account, right? If you put your money, like I used to have all my money in a savings account. I think I was earning, actually now I was looking at the bank rates. You can get like 5% savings rate, which is pretty bloody good.
Sorry to cut you there, but the problem with savings is that your money is not growing, right? But if you have an index fund, your money is growing. You got an 8% compound, plus you get dividends. In most of the Aussie index funds, you'll have about 65% of franking credits, right? So 65% of franking credit means the company has paid taxes on it, so you're not paying tax as well, right? And your portfolio is growing every day, every night. So it doesn't have to be either or. It has to be a combination of both. The composition might change over time. Sorry if I'm talking too much. Sorry.
No. It's right. No.
Makes sense.
That's why you are again.
See it, mate. You gotta think about it. You can't just go through your investing world not having a thought about where you're putting the money. And I love that you put so much effort and thought. I want to go through the rest of the portfolio because I think this is the exciting thing, how you're able to do this and some of the challenges that have come up. So if there's any challenges you can kind of think of, because surely it wasn't all smooth sailings. And then we can jump into some of the questions that are popping up. So anyone that has any questions for Gaurav, pop them in the comments and we'll answer as many as we can. But before we do that, we just got to jump into the sponsored post. The amazing thing with commercial property investing is that in most cases, it's cash flow positive from day one, which means that you can drive those profits towards paying down the debt. There are instances with commercial property investing where you can actually have the property pay itself off over 10 years, which is absolutely crazy. With commercial property, you get massive net yield, so you can expect anywhere between 6 to 10%. And as we've seen in the current boom, these properties not only provide large cash flow, they do certainly grow wildly in value too. Now, with big rewards comes some risk, and this is why you should de-risk your investment as much as possible. And the way you do that is with expert due diligence. And this is why we highly recommend people hire professionals to help you along in your investing journey. Steve Polisi of Polisi Property is one such expert. Being a chartered mechanical and structural engineer in a past life, Steve draws on his analytical and mathematical skills to do that expert due diligence for you. With 6 years experience in the space, Steve has over 1,200 property transactions under his belt. He's the guy you want in your corner, crunching the numbers and finding the best properties in the best locations, along with ensuring that you avoid the mistakes. Steve has actually even written the book on commercial property investing in Australia, and not only is it a bestseller, I believe it to be the most comprehensive in commercial property investing on the market today. He's been generous enough to give us a massive discount for our audience of 50%. So use the code OZPROP, click the link below, get a copy today, and start learning and getting on your commercial property investing journey.
And we are back. No, I love that there's, and next week's going to be an exciting, and this week has been an amazing session so far. If you loved talking about shares, we've got a treat for you next week. But no, so you had your Toowoomba property, which I was in an area I was like, oh, that's an interesting kind of, it just shows that yes, you can kind of, there's areas there that people may not be considered as sort of desirable, but it's still done exceptionally well. And so what kind of happened next? Like, how did you kind of like, so you got to, that was your fourth, because you had your third was in regional Vic, and then you had Toowoomba. And then how did you kind of, because you probably started to hit some malls, and did you? Is that what happened next up for number 5?
Yeah, before we go there, I just want to bring the audience back in interest. So we covered number 4. We got only 150K of cash put in.
Into the whole portfolio,
by the fifth property as well. Just walk into that. So by the
property, so hang on, your entire portfolio, you only put in $150,000 of cash.
So excluding the PPOR number 6, we only put 150K cash.
Wow. If people aren't sort of insurely excited by this stage, because that was an objection that people had. They sort of said, well, what's the LVR on the thing? And it's like, well, you were able to sort of reduce that because it grew. But go back to focus on number 5.
Yeah, so number 5 was in again back close to home, Gold Coast Council in the northern suburbs. So bought this for 676K. This was an interesting transaction, actually, I would say. So we had equity coming from 2 properties from Brisbane and the Upper Hunter property. So total equity was put as 183K, no cash deposit. I believe from memory around this time, lending was getting quite close to the point. So we had paid off, I think, car number 2. So that's been part of our journey, that we have paid off consumer debt. And then we have cleared that up. So this was bought for 676K. We were looking for about 4 weeks into 2 different suburbs, a suburb next door and this one, but we chose this one because this was about 100K less than the other one, and it just made sense. So bought this for 676K. I think this was listed for 710K back then. And it had been on market for about 3 weeks. So we called the agent, spoke to him, made what's happening, used some of the tips from Scott Agnett's call, what will sell for today. See, I'm giving all the credit, right? This is not something that we have learned. We have heard from people. So Scott Agate has been a big part of the negotiation skills that I've learned over time, or we've learned over time. Call the agent, what's happening, mate? What's the deal here? So he mentioned, good guy. He even calls me now. He wants to take the rent roll over, etc. What's happening with this? So he mentioned that the owner has moved to the US. Is currently in the market, and they are currently tenanted. They want to sell soon because I think there was a tax changeover during that time. And so, what will it buy for today? And I put an offer. And he came back the next day. Can we negotiate? And like, no, probably a few thousands. I think we put an offer for 678. Went to the building and pest inspection. So we didn't do the inspection before signing the contract. In fact, I think for none of the properties except the Brisbane property, we did inspections before buying. We use property managers to do inspections. Sorry?
You didn't do a physical inspection. You didn't see the house itself.
Before the contract, no. So the first house was owner occupied, so we did the inspection. The second house was through a BA. We did the pre-settlement inspection. That was a long drive from Coffs to Everglass, still remember it. With Victoria, I haven't seen this property. Probably would love to go someday. Beautiful spot.
It's a bit cold down there sometimes.
Yeah. Toowoomba, we did the pre-settlement inspection. We didn't visit the house before or did any inspections. We engaged a good property manager, still with us. Still with them, sorry. I should say the other way, give them credit. And then about that one, Gold Coast, we didn't inspect the property before buying it. We did the pre-settlement, or not the pre-settlement. After signing the contract, we did an inspection. We still had about 2 weeks of finance. The finance really ran out on this because we had equity coming out of 2 properties, as I mentioned before. So I had to mention to the sales agent that there will be a delay on the approval, and I was very transparent, but we will settle the deal. We are confident. So I think the finance from memory came in 3 weeks, and we worked with the same broker. Broker one still on this one, or actually 2 was the same company. And then we settled on this one with tier 3 lender.
Man, that's an absolute whirlwind. So just and I don't think you give yourself, yes, it's all part of the journey in the family, and you've absolutely bossed, because you said it was listed for 710, and this was in, what was it, sort of September 2022 roughly.
Fantastic.
Listed,
yes.
And you bought it for 672, I think it was.
676.
676.
So this was in September 2022 settlement, yeah.
And this is in Queensland, so we were kind of, I mean, we were looking in and around, floating in and around these markets. These aren't your kind of markets where things just sit on the market for 10 weeks and like some pockets of Victoria. But yeah, you kind of identified the opportunity and said, well, okay, you were able to get a property, and maybe it was overpriced initially anyway, but maybe not. So you're talking sort of close to 40, you're close to 50K, or between 40 and 50K off the listing price. Sorry, that could be right. 30 and 40K. So what, and that's just from actually kind of asking the right questions. So I think that's you, Gaurav. As much as you had some resources and learned some things, I think the other thing I'm picking up from your conversation is you just learn things really quickly and you're able to apply them. Because it's one thing to kind of listen to something. It's then another thing to go in and say, okay, I'm going to have this conversation and put it into play. So it's kind of that learning mindset.
Yeah, totally. And I think between both of us, myself and wife, and I think we have really stuck to the plan. We had a budget of 750K for this purchase, but we really didn't want it to extend because it's got to make money for you, right? When and I'll share something with you on this point about part of BA. Don't want to name them for any purpose. They actually reached out to me if I was interested in the market, like through Facebook, and they got the details of this property just out of interest when we were in the contract stage. Hey, you shouldn't buy this property. I said, why? I was like, you got so many tenants in this area. Like, could be, right? Good reasons. I heard them. But then you got to back yourself, right? We were discussed. And Gold Coast really has changed because of the migration policy, right? What happened in Gold Coast was there was a visa category that was being made available for people to reside with temporary residents. So we have a lot of tenants moving in. But then when people move into an area, they start liking it and they buy houses in the same area on the neighborhood. And we have seen so many people who have moved to Gold Coast in the suburbs and rent, but they bought houses. So eventually the prices have moved up. This one actually moved quite quickly. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Yeah, I mean, it's already just looking at the numbers now. I mean, you may have already sort of eclipsed what it was. You're sort of talking. I think that was about 30% roughly. It's done approximately 30% in between now. So in under about 2 years. And yes, there's other parts of Australia, Perth, for example, that have done more, but that's 15% year on year so far of the purchase.
Yeah,
with
what's interesting.
$150,000.
Yeah, roughly 183. But what's interesting with this one, we were able to refinance this property out in 3 months
Wow.
with a
Wow,
valuation of 829K from memory.
that's incredible. In
And
3
then
wait, in 3 months.
3 months, yes.
What? So 676 to 829 in 3 months.
Yes, absolutely. And again, and realistically, people may throw back stone at me that the value would not have gone so up, right? But the lender
Who cares? Yeah,
valued
the value it did.
29. Yeah,
It's kind of
so
the bank algorithm kind of said, yeah, well, there's other sales, and that's where there's potentially some opportunity for people as well. Like if you feel you have borrowing capacity, like get your broker. And I don't know if you did this, but get your broker to sort of shop the valuation around to make sure that you're getting the highest possible valuation. And if you decide to take that out, it's up to you. Like I'm not saying go and leverage yourself to the hilt tomorrow. Make your own calculated decisions, but there is potentially opportunity. Did you kind of have to go to multiple lenders to get that valuation, or was that from valuation one?
this one was from moving from tier 3 to tier 1. So moved from Aussie Select to CBA for this particular property. So
Yeah.
what we did was sorry?
CBA is generous with some of their valuations at the moment, I hear. Can be.
Yeah, CBA are great. Hopefully some of them are listening tonight. CBA are great. I'll just talk about that in a moment. So we refinanced out, got I think 140K worth of equity. And then we had tapped into our ETFs to get 100K out to buy the number 6, which is our current owner occupier. Bought that in February 2023, and I think moved in March 2023.
That's capped off an epic journey. So we're talking about you settled on the first, or went under contract the first in September of 2019, and the 6th property in February of 2023. So what's that?
Yeah,
Just
so,
over 3.5 years approximately, roughly.
yeah. So within 3 years and 11 months of moving to Australia, we bought these. Yeah, not even 4 years, right? So we've broken that record.
Yeah, under 4 years, and you've turned, let's say, what, 200, 300 grand over those 4 years into over $1 million worth of value, like over at what, 1.3 or something like that, maybe 300 grand into 1.3.
Yeah, so total loans are currently about, so if you look at the cash on cash return, so with 150 in the first 3 purchases and plus 100K in the current owner occupied, the equity is about 1 minus the loans about 1.4, so 250K into 1.4. And hence my point, it isn't one thing, right? It has to be a combination of the right asset classes, a combination of both. I mean, if we were not buying ETFs, we would have fallen short by 25, 30K on the deposit, right? The money wouldn't have been growing in the account. We would have fallen short.
In terms of getting the, sorry, go Joe.
Yeah, well, in talking about that, how did the portfolio change? Because you've got 5. So I see the 6 properties here: 545, 463, 450, 480 purchase. Sorry, no, it is not. 463, 340, 400. You went low value, and then you've jumped up the prices from 400 to 676, and now this PPOR purchase. How did the portfolio shift and change over time for these purchases for you? How did you think about that?
Yeah, totally. So the rents have gone up. So currently we are sitting what 152K of rent per year, and that's growing. I think we can grow about probably 10K more. The 545 purchase in Brisbane is currently about 950K. That's grown about 11% year on year. Then we had the Upper Hunter, which was 464. I think it's about 700 from comparables. That's about 14% growth year on year. Started with a 430 per week rent, sitting at 610. Regional Victoria 340, 450, not much growth, about 9% year on year. And then we had 330 rent starting, 450 rent. Toowoomba bought at 400, 550 now, growth about 12%. Rent of 400, now 475. Gold Coast bought at 676, I would say about 900. Got calls from agents to sell every week for 900, about thereabouts. Rent is about 700 per week. Started at 520. Yeah, I think we can go about $50 up on that one. So yeah, going
So
well.
did the asset type change? Did the way that you thought about the purchases change throughout the journey?
We always bought with the mindset that it has to be cash flow, if not cash flow positive, as close as possible. And our income's kind of supported as well. So totally get that, some of the comments that you can't do this on less income. Absolutely. But what you can probably learn out of this session today is how you can debt recycle, grow your portfolio, and continuously think how you can grow your money. It doesn't have to be tied to one asset class.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So kind of sounds
talking
like
about-
I'll get to this. Okay, sorry.
yeah, go on, mate. Go.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like as your income, because started off with those sort of the 350 to 400K properties, because your sort of income sort of may have not, you grew that income from your job, and then once you just kind of got towards the back end, did you as your income sort of increased, you then sort of decided to push the purchase price of those properties? Is that the way you sort of, but still keep it relatively cash flow neutral as cash flow? Was that kind of your strategy or approach, or?
Yeah, see, with the first one, Brisbane, we bought what we could afford at that time, or we didn't have that much deposit, right? 65K won't buy much back then. Deposit.
Yep.
We had incomes to support more bigger purchase, but we didn't have more deposit, so we just bought that one. Then with the subsequent purchases, we used equity, and that was available, so we just made it happen how it was supposed to happen. And to answer your question about cash flow, you might not get the cash flow at the time, but if there is a view of getting to a cash flow neutral in a few years and your income can support it, which in our case it could, we going back to the same principle, be the average investor for above average in period. You will get growth at some point if you buy in the right areas. I mean, there's no reason why Victoria won't have been growing except the land policy, right? So if you buy well, you hold, you get a mix of both, you have the income to support that, you build your portfolio around that.
Yeah. So it even, because going back to, I think you said this about 40 minutes ago, you sort of said you focused on buying roughly around, not too far away from the median house price of the area. So if you're picking in regional Victoria and the median is 400K in that particular area, that's around roughly what you're buying. You're buying on the Gold Coast where the median's around that sort of 700, 750. That's roughly around the type of property you bought for your investment properties, at least.
Yes, I think. Sorry, yeah, totally. So we looked at the data in terms of what's selling for what for. Look at the comparables. I mean, median sometimes can be slightly misleading because it's based on the number of sales, right? Median is 50th percentile of what's sold in an area. It can't be always right. If the houses sold were expensive, like in regional Victoria, in Upper Hunter, for example. Yeah, so for in Upper Hunter, for example, you could have a house selling for $1 million. Because it's got a substantial big land. So you need to look at comparables, what the similar house is selling for. And between both of us, I think we were on real estate when we could. None of these are like super fancy off-market purchases, right? We are just average investors with average returns. We want to hold these for more than the average, but average holding period to grow the returns here.
Yeah, this has been an incredible story, and thank you so very much for sharing it. I think that the numbers that you're talking about here are just absolutely ridiculous. Like the key trend that I'm seeing from here is make sure that, well, you've made sure that you're buying in locations that are going to grow, because the journey would have ended at each purchase if that property was not focused on a balance of cash flow and also equity growth. Because without that equity growth, you would never have been able to dip back in to pull it out to then go get the next one. So it is very much trying to balance the portfolio. I just think it's been absolutely incredible. 4 years, you've jumped in Australia in 2019 and built a $4.5 million property portfolio. You and your family should be so proud of this achievement. It's incredible.
Yeah. Just thank you so much for that. And also, what we have done subsequently is we have cleaned up all the loans. So each loan account per property has been cleaned up. So the Brisbane property is now, so we had not cross-collateralized, but cleaned up. So every loan account is now cleaned up with that respective property. So if we need to sell, we get the cash out rather than the equity being attached on the property. So like we had the Brisbane property loan attached to the Upper Hunter property. What we have done is we have
collateralized.
We hadn't crossed, but not crossed. So we have cleaned up the loan accounts to have that respective loan only. So rather than having loans across multiple properties, it's just sitting across respective properties. So if you need to sell anytime, we can go and sell. And with that, we have moved the change to the CBA private banking, which is in outcome of the session that you guys did with the NAB private banking. And that has really elevated our banking in terms of the interest rates that we're getting, the kind of features that we get with banking. It's really, really worked out well for us.
At what point, at what kind of point does that banking come into play? How the private banking?
Yeah, you need to have good incomes, definitely. And every bank has different criteria. I believe there was a session with the NAP guys as well. I think CBA's, again, the guys who are there from CBA can jump in. I think it's about 450K of income with the rental and the portfolio size of
with
similar
the rental
structure. Yeah, so they include the rental income,
including the rental. Oh, easy peasy.
Yeah.
Over time, that's easy peasy. Maybe not easy peasy straight away, but yeah, interesting. I've heard a lot. I don't know. As of late, I've heard a lot about private banking, and I know we had the NAB guy on, and it was a great session that we did there. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. You don't necessarily need a whole bunch to be able to get into it. There are little, tricks of the trade that you can to help you get better rates.
I want to know, Gaurav, because we tease that you may not be buying any more properties. We'll sort of throw some questions quickly. What's next for you? What do you sort of see? Have you put your property queue in the rack? Are you going to index? Like, what's next for Gaurav on the journey and family?
I mean, we don't see a reason to buy any more properties at this point. Again, it may change based on circumstances. We might buy more owner-occupied in future, and that's why we want to build on it. I was just looking at some numbers. If we continue to grow our rent at about 5%, that's probably about 400K in next 20 years. Not enough, because you would still probably have debt and costings. And that's one of the things which I find with property is people don't realize is your cost to repair, insurances, etc. also go up. So you need to factor that in. And hence we would be considering diverting a lot of our portfolio to building index funds. So we're looking at about, so I think the valuation, we're looking at 4% growth, about 7.5 mil on the investment properties, not including the owner occupied, because we might sell, upsell, whatever. And I think with ETFs, we're probably looking at about 4.5 mil, and that's just with the current cash flow support that we have. But I think if we get more leverage in place, we can build on that and get to similar path with that. One of the other things that we also want to look at is building our superannuation. And that's why probably reading a lot about the recontribution strategy and how we can build the accumulation funds and the pension funds would really help. So we're looking at a mix of equities there, not equities as in the property equity, but the index fund equity to dollar cost average and build the portfolio around that. I think dollar cost average is a great concept. Because
Yeah.
it's
People
not
are
just
saying, write as a book, Gaurav.
yeah, I've thought about this actually. Just while we were talking about the coming on session, I think probably we'll think about it, but probably we'll get licenses in place before doing that because all of this is quite technical. Like I was mentioning about the dollar cost averaging. Dollar cost averaging works well when you invest. But when you take the money out, I was trying to build get the calculator, and that's why I think in SMSF you should not probably look at property because you have to transact the whole investment, right? But when you get the money out, let's say if you take $10,000 out, the remainder of that fund is still growing every month and it's still compounding. I'll let that sink in.
I don't know what that means.
So
but I think
basically,
it's gonna-
Joe, once you kind of get to the stage where you're taking money out, you meet a conditional release or retire, you're essentially then you've to have funds from that. You can't just go and sell a toilet to fund that. So you've got a lumpy asset in there, and so you have to then sell that property to take the funds out of the SMSF. Whereas ETFs, you sell a parcel of I don't know 20 shares or whatever to fund the trip to Noosa or wherever you want to go. That's what Gaurav's saying.
But if there's $100,000 that's been invested in a property that's at $500,000 that's growing at 5%, then sell the asset down in 10 years and that's at 7%, then it's going to be worth $1 million. And then you're only paying at a 15% tax rate. So it's going to be better to then put that in. Then you put that capital into the shares to then give you the cash flow or put it into a commercial asset. Yeah,
The
there you
risk
go.
of
There's
doing
your-
you can do that, and great respect to this man. I've read a lot of his books. You should read that. He had
Get him on
started
the
with a lot
pod.
of if you
Oh,
can
Noel Whittaker.
if you can get Peter Thornhill, they would be another great person to get. I read a lot of his books and podcasts. So if you're looking
Okay,
at 500,
let's end on this. This looks good. What are you talking about here?
so we're talking 500K.
Yep.
Just an example. That's giving you a return of 8% per annum. You're drawing $20,000 at an indexation of 4%. So that expense, the withdrawal is growing, as you would see here. So first year you're drawing 20,800, but that's growing. That's growing over here. But look at the portfolio value here, right? You invested 500K, but your portfolio is growing. Your withdrawals are growing as well, right? But because the balance of your portfolio is invested, now you can do that in property that you can sell it. But in an index fund, you don't have to sell the whole piece and it still compounds. Now, if you do the property route and you invest 10 years later, I'm not saying that's not right, but then you have to allow time. You can't take 10 million out and put in index funds. You know the genius that you can get the return on day one. You have to build it over time and allow dollar cost averaging to compound. Probably Joe's go on, but what's happening here is the money is growing. So you see here that you got 87 years worth of money growing every year, and look at the return that you could get every month growing in that portfolio. So your portfolio is growing in spite of you withdrawing the money on the indexation rate.
Awesome. Yeah. I love it.
And this
That's the right
this
way to
doesn't
think
have
about it.
this doesn't have to be in retirement, right? You could have a war chest of equity sitting not in an offset account, in an index fund, growing, and you can tap on it when you need for funds like vacancy, interest rate going up. Like for PAYG incomes, we don't have possibility of increasing the hours, right? We don't have business incomes, but you can draw on this income if it's sitting.
Yeah, I just if you have an emergency in a down sort of market, it's I think there's merits to all strategies, and it's just whichever one you kind of works for your lifestyle as well, because that's one of the things that came through. Somebody said, well, how did you have to make, and we'll finish off on this, so I want to ask this one, and we'll tell people how they can reach out. Did you have to make any lifestyle sacrifices along the way, what did you sort of forego holidays? Like, how did you kind of do this as quickly as you have? So, because your income wasn't ridiculously crazy, it was good.
I guess we could probably call it choices, right? You don't have to make sacrifices. You still get holidays. I mean, Australia is a great country, right? You can still have camping trips. You can have short overseas trips. You can have trips anywhere. You got to enjoy life. So we always had a fund going into a holiday account where we could tap on it and use the money when needed. So don't overboard yourself on the cash flow. When you plan your expenses, make sure that you've got the entertainment funds. Life is for enjoying. Live life on the forefront. Investment has to happen on the background. This isn't a one-day business. It has to happen over 20, 30, 40 years. You got to plan it and build it over time.
So true. Yeah, that's a great way to end it, mate. You love talking about this stuff. Numbers are your jam. How can people, I guess, get more Gaurav in their life, or learn a little bit more about what you're kind of do, or how can we get more Gaurav in our life?
So I have no plans to, or we have no plans to leave our jobs. We enjoy our jobs. So don't please ask me if I would be a buyer's agent or anyone would be a buyer's agent. All respect for buyer's agent, but we have no plans. What I want to do next is, as part of my learning, I want to get into money coaching. And that's where probably I will start educating people, because it can't be one or either or, right? We have kids growing. It can't be a case of either or. It has to be a combination of right asset classes, right mindset. And I guess one of the points that I want to bring back on migration, when we migrate to a country, right, it's not just about our values. We build a lot of financial awareness. Don't leave what you've learned, right? Or I was talking to somebody yesterday from India, and he's saying, I do mutual funds. I do mutual funds in India, but I don't invest in index funds in Australia. I was like, why? You learned that, right? You've learned that over 20, 30 years. You've got educated. You've built an income stream on the learnings that you have. Why can't you replicate your financial knowledge? Bring best of the world, like you're learning in property in Australia. It's a great asset class, but bring what you've learned in 20, 30 years. Don't let it go. This is the migration mentality. It doesn't have to be the human coming in. It is the knowledge that has to be coming in. We get a lot of questions in the podcast judging people. Have you done this? No, I couldn't do this, right? If you ask me a question about trust, I can't tell you. I haven't done it because it didn't support me. But what I can tell you about is getting the right mindset.
Love it. Well, this is one of the things that people have noticed. One thing I noticed about this guy is educated himself very well. He knows what he's talking about. And it's just that dedication of picking up the book, picking up the podcast, listening to this podcast, listening to a podcast like this. It's been absolutely unreal. People are flooding in with the stuff. So you've got a bit of you've got a form here, which is talking about money. You're asking for feedback on this session and what people thought of this. Jump in there if you want to provide any feedback for this session. But yeah, thank you very much for coming on here, Gaurav, and sharing with what you've done. I mean, just the numbers alone are just incredible, and you're so mellow about it that it just feels, I'm just glad. It's refreshing, because anyone that's done what you've achieved, you hear it all in this Facebook ads and it's all BS. Well, it's probably, it may be true, but out there gloating. You're there, hey, how can I help people? How can I learn more from just even now? Like, you've got a learning mentality. Hey guys, I just did a live session with you. What can I learn from the live session I just did? So yeah, thank you very much. That's my key takeaway from this.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for kind of being, I suppose, contributing to the community and being the voice of sometimes the voice of a polite opposition. You're not just okay. You kind of come into a conversation with a different perspective, a different mindset, and often that challenges some people. But you do it very respectfully. So I really appreciate you being, and you're very humble as well. You sort of talked up all the resources along the way, and I think if people watch this back and take from it, really sort of as much as you can. Epic session, such a legend. Just kind of understand like that you can always learn something. There's something that we can take from, and I saw that in the other day. It's even after kind of 20, 30 years, this person who was reading this commercial, they learned something from it. So thank you, Gaurav, for sharing your journey. And I'm sure we'll hear and see more from you in Oz Property. So take it away, Joe.
Yeah. Thank you, mate. Let's go buy a property. See you guys later. Stay
Thanks, team.
well.
See you on next one.